Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our session where we will discuss the journey to 5G. My name is, let me go to the next slide, see if that works. Yep. Oh. My name is Nick Vanekas. I'm running within TOMIA the clearing and BI team, and I'm actually responsible for TOMIA's roadmap and the product innovation that we're doing. And I'm joined today by Tom Sofa. She's our senior product manager, responsible within TOMIA for VoLTE, NFV, virtualization, and also the user experience across all our products. And Eyal Zak, who is the head of the product network team, responsible for 5G and steering solutions. What we want to do today is really take you through a little bit of a journey and towards 5G and to talk about different topics. So first of all, what we will do is show you a little bit about the market, where we see the market going, what was the impact of COVID on this market. Then Tom will take over and talk about transitioning from VoLTE to 5G. I will give you then a little bit of an overview on how we see the market and how we see the market growing more complex and how automation can help here. And then Eyal will wrap up with 5G. Talking about how it's just around the corner and what are the different trends there that we see. And then there is still room for question and answer. In the meantime, what we'll do, we'll have some questions in the middle as well. But if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat, and we will make sure that we answer those questions and talk about them. So let me give you, and I promise you it's only one slide, but I just wanted to give you a high-level overview about TOMIA. So within TOMIA, we have more than 25 years of experience, both on the roaming and interconnect world. We are a company that came together from the merger of Telarix and Starhome Mac. And right now what we're doing is we're running roaming and interconnect settlement solution for our operators and real-time network VAS services for our operators. We're connected to more than 350 CSP worldwide, covering more than 185 countries. And if we're looking at our innovations, main focus areas that we currently have are IoT, big focus for us on 5G, and this is why we're sponsoring the 5G theme as well in the WAS this week. Voice over LTE, blockchain, AI, ML, and also NFV, which for us is also key in launching new real-time 5G services now and in the future. Before we start diving into the 5G world and into VoLTE, I just wanted to give you maybe a quick impact analysis on what we did in terms of Corona on our side, and it would be interesting for us to know what you think if this actually is impacting your 5G rollout there. So I will not spend too much time on it, but what you see on the right side is two pictures. And what is happening there is that you see on the upper right side is the picture of traffic and the drop of traffic in 2020. This is the red line that you see on top. And what we experienced there is that if we looked at the number of minutes and megabytes, we saw more than 70% drop during April 2020, and it stayed like that. Actually, the traffic went back to 2018 numbers until after the summer, and then it started picking up, slowly moving up to where 2019 was. And this is also what we see now in the beginning of 2021. So the number of CDRs dropped back, but it didn't drop back to 70% in minutes. And the main reason for that was IoT and the Internet of Things traffic. So what we already see, and I think that's what we want to keep in mind when we talk about 5G today, these IoT devices, before Corona hit us, they already accounted for more than 40% of all traffic. But what we saw is during the COVID period is that went up to 70%. And during summer, people were still going on holiday. We saw that it was moving back again a bit, but it's still right now around 50 to 60% of all devices. And that made operators think, and they were coming back to us and say, okay, we need to start making sure that we understand what is this IoT traffic, because we need to go to a different kind of business model. And I think we need to keep that in mind, different business models, different charging models. We need to keep that in mind when we move. And we talked today about 5G and what is the move of operators to this 5G infrastructure. Because it's all about new use cases, new business models, and how do you make sure that you can manage all of that. So just to keep in mind for the rest of the presentation that these were the numbers that we saw. But without further ado, I would like now to hand over to Tom, who will take us through the VoLTE part.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nick. So as Nick said before, I'm going to talk a little bit about the transition from VoLTE to 5G and what's going on, what is the journey and how it looks like in our eyes. When we are looking at 5G as currently the final destination or where we want to be at, we're talking about a transition that is quite complex. And so it was kind of divided into different sections that we need to support in order to eventually enable the full-blown 5G. So the first step that we probably, most of us are already familiar with, especially with if we're speaking about the roaming world, is the VoLTE, voice over LTE, where we need to move our voice from being handled by a circuit switch to a packet switch method. This is in order to provide a better quality of service, to cut on maintenance payments and all kinds of things, all kinds of costs that might hit us, and also to be able to actually manage one single infrastructure, the IP infrastructure, for the entire network platform. Later on, or in parallel, we want to make sure that we support virtualization. And this is what I'm going to cover today. We want to migrate our core and value-added services eventually to some kind of virtual infrastructure in order to have a more fluent network management. I want to be able to manage my resources where I need them and not to have them, not to just decouple the software from the hardware and be able to use them in the best way that I can exploit those resources. Later on, Nick will speak a little bit about automation, how we can reduce repeating tasks and minimize risks as traffic scales. And finally, Eyal will cover slicing and the 5G opportunities. So let's start with a question. In the journey to 5G, where would you say that you are now? You can answer more than once, of course, because things are being done in parallel. Please enter in the chat, 1 for deploying VoLTE roaming, 2 for pushing for process automation, 3 for moving towards network virtualization, 4 working on 5G roaming. You can send your answers in the chat. We'll look back at that at the end of the session. Feel free, by the way, if you don't want to share with everyone, feel free to share it privately to one of us. Yeah, let me know when you have enough answers and I'll move on. See the answers are coming.
Let's move on and we'll speak about in the end of your section.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so thank you very much for the participation. When we're talking about VoLTE, VoLTE is already happening. I'm talking about VoLTE roaming in specific. We're talking about 2G, 3G sunset. We have currently officially 77 operators already announced network closures. The estimation is that we have a lot more, but it just wasn't officially announced. But most operators are having in their plans, at least if not a sunset, but reducing dramatically the number of users and increasing the migration to VoLTE. Why is it happening, or what is the incentive? So this is, sorry, one of the reasons. And the second one is new players, new operators and new CSPs that are now rising, even if it's MVNOs. They're offering pure LTE networks. It means that they don't support circuit switch at all. And if we want to work with them or to be able to sign agreements with them, we need to support voice over LTE for roamers. So we have currently 30 pure LTE networks around the world that are up and running. When we're talking about costs, it's a huge incentive. We have major costs that coming from, paying for different spectrum. If I need to pay for 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G spectrum, it costs me a lot of money. Moreover, we do know that the maintenance itself for having infrastructures that are both supporting circuit switch and IP are costly, and I need to maintain a lot of components and a lot of people to operate that. We see in the market that there is a major migration towards the LTE and the 4G and the 5G. Just in 2020, $17 billion were spent on LTE licenses in the US only. So it's a major migration, and we do see that the industry is moving on. And lastly, but not less important, is the experience. We see that the output is growing dramatically for each satisfied user. So when my customer is satisfied, he's spending 140% more than the average customer, which is amazing because we're talking about data consuming that is already rising, and we're talking about calls, as Nick covered before. And as long as they will be happy and pleased, and they'll go forward to new applications and virtual reality and all kinds of online gaming, even if they will be happy, they will keep buying their more and more data and more voice with me. And this is where we aim to be. But VoLTE comes with some risks or some things that we need to consider. We have mapped 3 major use cases that comes even after the VoLTE was enabled and you already established IMS infrastructure and you've signed roaming agreements with your partners. We do still see some pitfalls that needs to be attended. First one is SMS delivery. We're talking about the need to be compliant with regulations and send welcome SMS for the LTE roamers. If I'm talking about pure LTE roamer, then if my SMS service does not support or does not know to recognize a LTE update location, then I will not be able to identify that this roamer landed abroad and send him an SMS when he arrives. And this will not prevent the bill shock or the regulation compliancy that I need to stand for. This is, as I said, most relevant for pure LTE networks. The second interesting thing that we see is that when we apply a steering policy that is not taking VoLTE per se or VoLTE parameters under account, we are risking at margin erosion. We will see expensive wholesale costs that can be saved by correct routing or preferred routing to VoLTE network. And also here we can allow, we can actually see poor quality of service if I'm used to have VoLTE or even better 5G at my home network. And then I'm going abroad and I'm getting a 2G service. This is quite a gap. This is a poor quality of service. If I won't be able to steer my customer correctly, then I'm exposed here. And this is a major risk for the next 2 or 3 years when we still see all kinds of environments and all kinds of mobile generations around the roaming scenario. And if I'm talking about call handling, you probably already know that in voice over LTE, the home network is now handling all of the subscribers and things are changing. So my experience as a customer, as a subscriber will not be the same as it was in 2G, 3G. And this is something that needs to be attended because I want to enable smooth migration for my roamers. If I'm giving them a better service as VoLTE service when they're abroad, I want to give them also a smooth migration so they won't feel the difference if they're falling back to 2G, 3G in terms of call correction. I want to make sure that they will be able to dial the same numbers that they used to dial before easily. I want to make sure that I will educate my customers, but I want to make sure that they won't lose any calls or have bad user experience because I didn't send the right SMS or they didn't read it or whatever. And this is critical also for voice over new radio in 5G. So those are risks, but those are also opportunities to monetize. If we'll take a look, for example, at a non-VoLTE roamer that speaks 5 minutes, the average cost, let's say, is 8 cents a minute. And if it speaks for 5 minutes, we will actually pay a wholesale price for the visited network of around 40 cents. On the other hand, If I look at a Volta roamer using a Volta infrastructure, and he will speak the exact same 5 minutes. Now we did our calculation and we did our math, and we saw that 5 minutes are equal to about 1 megabyte of data. And 1 megabyte of data will cost me only 6 cents. So the same 5 minutes, my Volta roamer is probably getting a better quality on his phone, on his supported phone, of course, and supported environment, and I pay less. So it's a win-win situation. And instead of paying almost 7 times more for this call, I can save on the wholesale price. And not only that, we also have some benefits on the interconnect rates, because now when the call is always going back home, from our data, from our analysis, around 80% of the calls are going to home domestic destinations. So I don't even need to pay the interconnect fee because I'm connecting the fee within the home country. I'm connecting the call within the home country, so I'm saving those costs as well. So we're talking here about a great opportunity to monetize. So this was about Volta. The next thing that I want to share with you is a more, let's say, it's a huge topic and it's a more diverse one. So why should I even go towards virtualization on my roaming value-added services platform? So we need to consider some critical things. First of all, I want to reduce the dependency between the software and the hardware. And why is that? As I said before, the main goal of 5G, and Eyal will show it soon, is to be able to play with my resources and take them wherever I need them. So if I have a computing resource or a server that is not being used currently because it's not peak time at my destination, it's not, even if it's COVID time. So I want to take this resource and use it elsewhere where I need it. Let's again take the COVID example. If I have, let's say, 10 resources for my roaming services, but now I only need one of them in order to support the roaming traffic that is coming in and out of my country. So I have 9 idle pieces of resources that are sitting there. On the other hand, my domestic traffic was increased. People are working from home. They are looking, they're watching TV. They are watching, all kinds of things online. I need to enforce my resources so I can just move them or reassign them to my domestic activity. This is a huge benefit that only virtualized platform allows us, to take my resources and manage them and orchestrate them automatically within my network premises. Of course, it's also easier to support the automation and orchestration. I can just define thresholds whenever I want a resource to be moved on. I want to scale up a resource. I can orchestrate my network behavior according to seasonality or all kinds of things that I want to take under account. So this is another thing that the virtualized environment allows me. If I want to roll out a new service, it's easier. I have a map or a template and I'm saying what I need. I'm asking the network, I'm telling it, this is what I need, please provide it to me. And this is another thing that we get. Here, everything is wired and you just need to roll out the service. So it gives me flexibility and high customizability. And last thing, but I don't think it's less important, even this is a big change and it's a huge investment in terms of network and what I need to change. And if I want to move my call to a virtualized environment, it really is a huge overhead. And so when I'm doing this investment, it's important to keep in mind that I'm doing it for the next voice generations. I'm moving on as network advanced to 5G and even 6G, and I'm allowing network liquidity to enable the future needs of my network. I'm laying the grounds for my next phase. When we talk about virtualization, we see all kinds of examples. So those are just 3, but to cover in high level what we see today in the market. So we have, for example, the static virtual machines. This means I'm virtualized, I'm on virtual machines, but I'm not fully orchestrated, I'm not fully automated. And this is a great option, if services are coming to end of life and I want to make sure that I'm starting to prepare for the next phase of my network. Then we have the virtual island. The virtual island is talking about the fact that you do have some, your services deployed or the network components deployed on virtual machines or some kinds of, even in virtual network functions. But I want also something to manage them. I have a manager for those elements that will be able to monitor them, to make sure that their health is okay, their status is okay. If I need to scale up, I don't need anyone to do it manually. I can give, a threshold and make the system do it automatically. But still, I'm being orchestrated separately than the other services on my network. So I have some kinds of islands. One island is, for example, for value-added services. Another one is for core. Another one is for EPC. All kinds of things, and different entities are managing it, but eventually they are living as independent islands within my system and being operated automatically. And lastly is the full-blown NFV, the standard NFV, as was designed by, we have the ETSI standard, we have the MANO. So all those words you probably heard here and there. This is talking about the standard NFV, where eventually the full-blown 5G will go towards. And it says that actually every vendor or every piece in my network is being deployed on a virtual function at some point, or virtual resource. And there is one entity of orchestrator that is just managing everything. He has all the mapping of the network, and he can just allocate the resources and manage the network, knowing that, for example, he has total of 100 resources, and he knows exactly where to divert it, when to close a resource, when to open a new one, what in the system needs to be restarted, all kinds of things that are being fully automated and make me as the operator be less concerned about that and more efficient on my network. So we were talking about VoLTE and we were talking about virtualization just a little bit. I know that I touched the point, but those are just two building blocks on the way, on the path to 5G. Now Nick is going to cover the automation part, and later on, as I said, Eyal will cover the slicing and 5G.
Thanks, Tom.
Just before Nick will continue, just to reply to answers. So we got some replies to Tom's questions. So 60% are in the stage of deploying VoLTE roaming, so that's nice. We also have 20% that are already moving to network virtualization, and 20% that are working on the 5G roaming. So as we see, most of you are currently in the VoLTE stage.
Nice, thanks.
Thanks, Eyal. So yeah, we're talking today about the two technologies and going a little bit into the network technology. I wanted to also take a little bit of time to take a step back and look at what it all means for you as a roaming manager. What we actually see, if you're looking at the different numbers that are being distributed by companies like Juniper and other analysts, is that the top line in roaming in terms of total revenues, not even taking Corona into account, is actually a flat line. It's not growing that tremendously. But at the same time, there is a big need for differentiation and building new use cases out there, which actually increasing complexity on your ends. So in order to deal with that complexity within TOMIA also, we're looking at how can we now automate things for you? Because these new use cases, what massive IoT and 5G are doing is that we're no longer talking about a minute, we're no longer talking about a megabyte or an SMS, but there are all kinds of new parameters like a bandwidth, delay, the presence in your network, these kind of things. And that's what is causing you to negotiate different business models, new charging models as well, because all these use cases, for sure, they require global connectivity. You know, we saw some investigations also from the European Commission, for example, that are looking already at how do we make sure that we ensure pan-European connectivity for these massive IoT and 5G use cases. So it's all about seamless connectivity across borders there. But that requires new business models to monetize, because if you have an IoT device, a sensor that does many different sessions, but almost no megabytes, you maybe want to charge differently for that, or you might want to have a different SLA for that. And that drives complexity into your partner, into the partner ecosystem and in the different charging models that you have with your partners. What we see right now is that where previously you had one agreement with your roaming partners, over the last few years, you already started rolling out IoT agreements with your different roaming partners. And now we see more and more segments building up where you want specific charging models, and with network slicing, and Eyal will talk about that in the next part of the presentation, we actually expect many more technical possibilities to charge differently and to have different SLAs with your enterprises that you have in there. So all in all, how do we make sure and how can we deal now with this automation? Right now, the number of agreements and charging models is increasing. So why is this happening? So maybe let's look at that first. The global IoT business are already driving your roaming growth, where we see the subscriber growth topping off. IoT is definitely growing like crazy. I mentioned it in the beginning when I talked about COVID-19, but over 40% of all inbound roaming devices that we see in many networks are already IoT devices. The behavior of those devices is completely different. And like I said before, during the Corona, we already saw that it's going up to 50 to 60% because most people are not traveling anymore. So the only thing that is left in your network are these permanent roaming devices that are being used for IoT traffic. We believe that after 2025, more than 1 billion devices are actually in a roaming state, and 33% year-on-year growth on the IoT roaming revenues until 2025. So that means that you, from an operator point of view, it's really good now to start looking at how can I monetize that differently? Do I need to start rolling out different charging models? How will 5G impact my service delivery to the enterprises? Can I start offering different services, new SLAs? But all that keeping in mind that the top line in roaming is expected to be flat. So how do I deal with this complexity in this growing market in terms of number of use cases, but still a flat top line? So what we see is that the growth is mainly enabled by massive IoT networks rollout and mainly focusing on low bandwidth use cases. And this is what we see also in the different charging models and business models that operators are coming to us. 5G rollout is mainly used to enable these differentiated services, especially with 5G and also with BC as charging models below that. We can actually start monetizing this. We can start monetizing this differentiation that you can provide because of 5G, and we can start charging differently based on different parameters like radio access type, like quality of service and QCI parameters that you have there, but also still, of course, based on minutes and megabytes. And what you see is that what you need to have in terms of a roaming part is that your enterprises, they're demanding a certain SLA. This SLA, you also need to make sure that you have the same back-to-back covered with your roaming agreement. So that means you need to have this global connectivity in place in order to have this B2B2B relationship there. So you have your partners in place in order to provide the right SLAs to your enterprises. And only then you can run this enterprise business. And this is what we believe right now. It's all about IoT. The next step with 5G, and we will talk about that when we go about EL, it's all about the different verticals, different enterprises, and how you build right services for them. Sorry, Tom, there is a little bit of a delay. Okay, yeah. So what we think is that you need to start looking at the full wholesale monetization lifecycle, as we call that. So if you look on the left side of the page, it's all about a life cycle of from negotiating a deal and preparing a deal, which means simulating the right deal with your partner for that specific segment, forecasting the deal, negotiating that, and also putting a budget in place, to executing this in real time. So this is what Tom was, for example, talking about when we talk about voice over LTE steering and when we talk about 5G steering. How do we execute this SLA that you negotiated in real time? How do we protect our services correctly? How do we make sure that they're not being abused? And then how to monetize them and do, of course, the proper analytics around it so that you can prepare again. So we're talking about this full flow from preparing, negotiating to execution to settlement and analytics. And it's all about connecting these dots and connecting them together. So for example, if you negotiated a certain deal and you have a proper revenue commitment for this deal, you want to be notified when this revenue commitment is being met or when this is not being met so that you can actually start steering differently. What we see right now, and that's what you see on the top right, if we analyze some of our customers and we really do the comparison of what are the deals that you're having, what is the commitment that you have, and how fast do you react in your execution in the real-time network, and how actually effective is that for you? We see that there's a lot of things to gain there, right? So building a connection from your analytics and from your deal management system towards the real-time execution in the network, you can actually gain a lot of different benefits there. What we see right now is because you're not reacting fast enough. We see that around 1.5 million in penalties could actually be avoided because of the inefficient steering that is going on. All right. So, but if we're talking here about the tier one operators, if we're looking at commitment being met or not being met, and you haven't steered properly, what is the efficiency rate that you can gain here? And then we're talking about like millions of dollars here. The other thing what we see is that there's still a lot of disputes going on between customers, right? This is why people are talking about blockchain in the market. This is also why people are going for partnerships now with blockchain providers, because what's happening really is that the agreement that is being put in place in one system is not necessarily the agreement that is being put in place by a partner there. So this inefficiency, make sure that at the end of the deal period, you go back to each other and say, okay, we're not matching here, so we're going into a dispute. This is taking a lot of resource work. This is taking a lot of time, and it's taking a lot of cash flow inefficiencies between operators. When we're talking about the future and when we expect that the number of agreements is going to increase with a number of factor 5, this number of disputes will increase even more if we don't automate this properly. So this is why you see different vendors, different industry bodies working on new technologies where operators can collaborate and where we make sure that we can avoid those disputes and we can make sure that that cash flow is going very smoothly. It's not just about now, because we see already these inefficiency happening, but in the future, when we increase the number of business models and charging model with a factor 5, this is becoming more and more important. And last but not least, and I think that's what we see right now already happening, because you see this huge amount of IoT devices already in the network, and they're still being charged with the normal megabyte pricing in a lot of cases. Operators are missing out on a huge opportunity to monetize those IoT devices. I understand that it's all about incoming versus outgoing if you also have your IoT business. But what we see happening, if you take some numbers across a couple of years, is we're talking about millions a year here that you are missing because you're not detecting the IoT devices correctly and feeding that information into your deal management system so that you can negotiate and simulate the right deals for your IoT business. So I wanted to highlight this as a step here why we think we need to start looking at the full wholesale management life cycle. So how do we make sure that we can look at the full span of preparing a deal to executing this in real time, and then to monetize that as well, because you need to look at this full automation here, because that's when you can start dealing with the complexity that 5G and massive IoT will bring to you in the future. Having said that, I would like to hand over to Eyal. So we talked first about Volti and how that actually can actually bring you some efficiencies. Then Tom talked about the virtualization. I showed you how automation can help you to bring efficiencies as well, especially looking at the complexity that 5G and massive IoT will bring. And now Eyal will take you through the 5G journey on how this, how slicing would work in that part, and also looking at the 5G fully virtualized and automated network. So Eyal, over to you.
Great, thanks, Nick. Let me request control. Perfect. So 5G is really a game changer. Let's discuss that in more details, and maybe before we start talking on 5G, let's understand the evolution of the mobile and how we basically got to this point for 5G. So as you know, we had the 1G on the 1980s, which is basically was only basic analog voice services. 2G added mostly the SMS. It's the start of the digital voice. Later on, we have the GPRS, low-speed data, or 2.5G. The 3G was all about broadband, high-speed data, more starting of the internet access journey. There wasn't really video. There was some circuit switching video, but it wasn't really a high quality video that only came on 4G on the 2010. It was much faster bandwidth, IP network streaming apps, and it's really the start of the video revolution. And VoLTE came right after in 4G. But 5G is really, again, a game changer. That's, you know, the machines are coming, the IoT era, many new use cases for consumer and enterprise, new radio. So this is really an evolution. And it's funny, but we all already see that people are starting to talk about the 3G, the 6G, which will be much faster. You know, the frequency will be much higher, hundreds of more bandwidth than 5G. They're actually starting to talk about how data centers can get cellular access. And also, if you're talking on the 5G, now more for the enterprise and the competition to the landline, in the 6G, we're actually starting to talk about how data access can leverage the mobile. So this is really amazing. If we go to talk more on the 5G, again, the 5G is really both evolution and revolution, right? So if we look on more on the technology side, it's really an evolution from 4G. The latency is much better, the availability, much more bandwidth, the total cost will be reduced, the battery life will be much better, and the coverage and so forth. So there are many benefits, mostly technical, on the 5G. Many reasons for that. The mobile operators are starting to play more head-to-head with the landline and offering new use cases. The traffic is rising mainly due to video streaming. We see IoT required billions more devices, so the network need to support that. Devices, you know, all the smartphones are becoming much more complex, so they need more power, so they need to be more efficient in the power from the network. And we see that the network is increasing and we need more energy efficient. So this is much better in the 5G. So it's really an incremental improvement of the technology. But not only that, 5G is also a revolution. Many use cases, many new use cases that will be relevant for the 5G, like manufacturing, energy utilities, public safety, for example, video streaming, etc., automotive, autonomous cars. So you heard these wonderful use cases that will allow, in the end of the day, to service provider to do, you know, tons of new money. And what's interesting is that 5G will basically need to offer so much in one core network, really trying to make everybody happy, you know, different type of application, different requirements. We need to support both consumers and industry. The 5G will also need to support the core 5G, different kind of radio, you know, the new radio of the 5G, the 4G, also Wi-Fi. And there is also about the slicing and how we can support the slicing. So it's really a radical innovation. It's really a revolution and not just an evolution, you know, like the old generation. And we talked about all the virtualization and the different vertical. And we see that, you know, already happening, of course, you know, huge number of deployments. You can see here how we are mapping that. More than 110 mobile operators already launched 5G, more than 50 countries. It's actually the fastest deployed mobile technology in the history. If we compare 5G to 4G and 3G, we see that 5G is by far the fastest deployment technology. And we see that, you know, forecasting that more than 60% of the world population will have 5G support by 2026. And we hear that also from you, from the service provider, that more than 50% will have some kind of 5G deployment by end of 2023. So we really see that happening and happening very fast. Let's have another question following the question we did in the VoLTE. We would like to understand how are you ready for 5G? So we'd be happy if you can again, in the chat, tell us about your readiness of the 5G. Did you already deploy it in your home country, or are you planning to do that by end of this year? What about roaming? Are you already offering 5G roaming, or you plan to do that? Or not really, you know, you're still not there. Maybe in a year or more, we'd be happy to hear that. And let's get back to this question in the end of this session, and we can understand, you know, what's their status. Again, I remind you, you can have any general question in the chat or in the Q&A session. We'll try to cover everything in the end of this section. So let's move on. Let's discuss now about the use cases specifically for the 5G roaming. So we understood, you know, the 5G motivation, but what about roaming? So first, you know, customer expectation. Your customers want and expect the same 5G services that they got in the home network. They would expect that also to have it while they are roaming. We talked about enterprise, many specific use cases that would need 5G roaming, like video conference, for example, you know, while I'm roaming, video surveillance, remote offices, and of course, connected vehicles. So there are many enterprise-specific use cases that will need 5G roaming, and domestic will not be enough. And of course, the IoT, you know, vast amount of data, security, low latency, a lot of challenge with IoT roaming. And we see that happening. So we see many 5G roaming agreements, you know, like Swisscom and Telecom Italy, Verizon. So I will not go over everything, but we see a lot of 5G roaming agreements are being signed, and we expect many more in this year in 2021. So again, that not only that the 5G is great, but there are also specific use cases why you need 5G roaming. The 5G roaming also, of course, bring a lot of challenges, and it's important that, you know, US roaming manager will start planning that. We have a lot of activity that you need to start. Automation, for example, commercial issue, devices you need to handle, and of course, network slicing. We talked about automation in Nick's section, why we need the business automation, why we need automated insight, more analytics, a lot of issues of operation efficiency, why you need to go to virtualization to support multi-tenancy, multi-services is very important for 5G and all the nice use cases. A lot of commercial issues. You will need to update all the roaming agreements specifically for the 5G. Charging, billing, and settlement is a huge issue. You know, moving from TAP to BC, how we can make this charging and billing domestically and handle all the slicing, etc. Many pricing options for 5G, whether it will be price per volume, revenue share, what about SLA, the local breakout versus home routing, that's also affect a lot on the actual commercial issues. Devices, many devices that have different frequency. You need to decide which devices will be supported on your 5G network, different kind of radio. IoT bring a lot of challenges, different attributes that we need to see that they will also work while roaming. Steering, we need a specific steering capability. How can you steer the right devices to the right networks with different capabilities, different type of devices, different subscription for your user? You need to handle all that and make sure that your steering platform support that. Network slicing, you know, different SLA agreements, different implementation. How will you charge differently per slice? What about all the slicing analytics and insights? Again, steering, how can you steer your user to the right slice? So that a lot of challenges in this, and this is a good time to start preparing for this. Regarding steering, 5G also bring a lot of evolution on the steering method. You all know that the first steering method was the simple SIM card. It was preloaded with your preferred networks. It was very limited. lack of accuracy. It didn't really consider real-time usage commitment, so it was really hard-coded, it was static, and it's also very limited in the number of networks. Then we had the OTA, the over-the-air steering. It wasn't really in real time. Also, some devices don't really support the OTA. Some mobile devices need to do the refresh, so this is also not optimum. We also have the signaling steering. So in 2G and 3G, we have the map, for example. Then we have the diameter for the 5G signaling. And again, this was a reject base. So every reject action actually trigger an error in the visited network, which implies that there was a network failure, some kind of network failure. And there was a lot of bad effects for commercial and technical and quality of service management. So it was much better than the SIM card and the OTA. And we actually have hybrid steering that do both OTA and signaling. But again, this is not perfect. There's also, it's not really bulletproof. You know, there is some capabilities for the visited network to do anti-steering. And 5G really try to help in that. 5G leverage HTTP2, so we have a different signaling protocol. So we can now do 5G steering based on HTTP. And even there is a new standard, the 5G application function, which is actually the first time that the GSMA made the standard for steering. And this is great, and this is solve a lot of things. It actually allow the home operator to request the devices that is connected to the visited network to connect to a preferred network. So it's imitate the OTA steering, but in the network, in the core network. And it's also protect all the anti-steering because all the security mechanisms. So this is much better, you know, than all the steering option. Of course, in the 5G, because we will always need to work in parallel, both 5G and 4G network. So you will always need to support all the different steering options, starting from old generation to the 4G and 5G. So you will not just upgrade to a new service. You will need to have all these capabilities in parallel. So of course, it's add more complexity to the steering solution. Okay, so again, we talked about it a little bit in Nick's presentation, why we need automation. Let's understand specifically from the 5G angle, how the 5G is really inserting a lot more complexity. So in the 2G and 3G, it was quite simple. We had voice, we had data, we had SMS. We basically needed to manage the retail, the MVNO, the wholesale partners. 4G added devices, the NB-IoT, for example. So now we also need to handle devices on top of that. The 5G will actually add more enterprises, you know, network slicing, fixed wireless access, all the edge computers. So everything is becoming much more complex. And this is why we really believe that automation is a critical thing. You need to insert machine learning and AI technology to help you. You will have API, third-party vendor that you will need to integrate them. And of course, full virtualization, as we said. And new different business models that you will need to manage, platform-based, outbound, rental, managed services. So again, without getting too much to the detail, the 5G bring a lot of complexity, and automation is a key. So this is very important. Okay, so we wanted really to discuss the 5G in this section, but not only 5G, because as we said, it's really a journey. So you need to start from the VoLTE deployment to the virtualization, to the automation, and then finally we'll go to 5G. So this is very important. We talked about how 5G will dramatically change the business and the technology landscape. So again, it's not only the technology, but all the business is being changed. you really need to drive the automation for the wholesale management. It's a long journey. It's not a short one. It's not a one-stop. It's a combination of evolution and revolution, as we said. It's really about creating new cases for consumer, for enterprise and machines. It's a great way to monetize the new service. You know, for years, the telcos are talking about the fact that we don't want them to be like a dumb pipe, not just handling the connectivity. 5G, maybe for the first time, will really allow the service provider to insert new use case and a new feature and much better way to monetize their network. And again, as we said, it's really requires planning. It's all about the planning. It's all about the planning of your delivery strategy. And you need to start doing this planning today. And of course, TOMIA is here to help you. I hope you got the main messages, and we are here to help you. We have 8 more minutes, so we'll be happy, of course, to answer some of the Q&As I see that we already have. This is our email, our marketing email. So if we are not answering your question today, or if you want to ask us question later on, please do feel comfortable to send us a direct email, and we promise to answer you. So before we go to Q&A, I'd be happy, Nick or Tom, if you can let us know what was the answer to the chats for the second question about the 5G status, and then I suggest we go to the Q&A.
Sure. So there were not that many answers, Eyal. There was actually 2 questions in one, right? So one is, did we already deploy it at home? We had only people positively answering that they already deployed it in the home country. There were no answers that said that they were not in the home country deployed yet. If you talk about 5G roaming, there were a few answers. Half of them said that they were already offering 5G roaming. The other half said, not really, probably next year or later. I think we had 2 Q&A questions. The first one was, will VoLTE roaming mean a revenue reductions for the visited operator? Maybe something that's for you, Tom, to answer.
Yes. So yes, indeed. If we're looking, you know, at the dry statistics, then yes, it means that if we pay less as a home network for the visited network on the wholesale price, directly it will impact the visited network revenues. But if we look eventually on the end of this revolution, is we will remain, I'm guessing that during negotiation, the operators will make sure to maintain the same delta between what they're paying to what they're getting. So the revenues, the bottom line will remain the same eventually. But in this time of migration, when we're looking at different technologies, indeed the home network will gain more if they will will be able to steer to VoLTE network faster, and as a VoLTE network visited network to either maintain a circuit switch support or to have a well-calculated, well-analyzed traffic or a billing analysis, let's say, that will allow you to sign the agreements and make sure that you maintain the same delta, as I said before. But what's interesting in here, I'll just add another sentence, is that currently what we see worldwide is that the retail pricing per 1 minute of call remains the same. So if I'm a subscriber, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not impacted pricing-wise. If I'm talking 1 minute on a VoLTE infrastructure or on a non-VoLTE infrastructure, I will pay still, let's say, $1. But you as the home network will be able to pay less for the wholesale network, so it will increase your margins. So this is some things that we need to analyze with you and to see with which network it's better for you to pursue VoLTE roaming agreement now. with which one you better wait a little bit because of the revenues. All kinds of interesting analysis that we can help you do, or you can also do yourself based on your network and knowledge. I hope this answered the question.
Thanks, Tom. So I see three questions, one in the QA and two in the chat. So let me address that. First, regarding the presentation, I'm sure you can get it from the WASP, but I'd be happy that if you will send us an email to the email that we showed, marketing, I'd be happy to send the deck to anyone that will request that directly from us. Regarding the agreements, so yes, it was mainly for the non-standalone. The list that I've shown about the roaming agreement are currently for the non-standalone. This is the first stage. We will, I assume, by end of this year, maybe next year, we'll start seeing more standalone roaming agreements. Remember that for standalone, both sides need to have a standalone core, so it will take a little bit time. So the answer is the 5G non-standalone. Regarding, by the way, we didn't really get into the technology about it, so maybe I will say in a sentence, when we are talking about the 5G non-standalone, we are talking about a 4G core with new radio or 5G. So only operators can only upgrade the radio, but they can continue with the 4G core. They will not get all the nice feature of the 5G core, but they will have some better bandwidth and latency, etc. So it's a nice, good first step, the 5G non-standalone. The last question was about the 5G roaming. If we want to compare back to home or local breakout, you know, what is more, or what is better? So this is a very good question. Without a great answer, I think, because it really depends on the use case. So if I'm traveling, if I'm roaming, and I need, for example, a very low latency, video streaming, maybe for video surveillance, or of autonomous car, the latency is very important, so I will need a local breakout. Telephony-wise, you know, if I'm doing a lot of calls to my home country, probably it will be cheaper to do the back to home. So this is something that both service provider will need to agree between themselves, you know, when they're doing the local breakout, when they're doing the home routing and the pricing, etc. So I don't think there is really a yes, it's not really a yes or no question. So it's really relevant to the specific use cases, and also it will probably be, you know, a mix of both to specific customers or specific type of customer, and of course you need to split it to humans and to machines. That's also different. So it's very complex, and but in the end of the day, this is something that the home operator and the visitor network will need to close between themselves.
Thank you all for having us. We are available at for any question. This is our email, as shown here, and we're available at your service. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.